Okay, cool. So today's talk is going to be about morality in humans, but we are not really talking about, what is right and what is wrong, right? We're really talking about what are the fundamental principles in humans that allow us to feel morality? What are the fundamental steps we go through as we develop a moral view on the world, right? What are shortcomings that we do, like independent on like what kind of opinions you have, right? We're not going to say like some opinions are better than others today, definitely not. What we're going to do is we're going to analyze what kind of cognitive errors a lot of people are doing due to evolutionary reasons that bias them in the way they understand morality, right? Really independent of what we believe in. And so basically, the talk split like this, that Maximilian is first going to talk about morality in children and in infants and how they develop, like how the beginnings of morality develop, since he's very interested, especially in these years. And so I'm later joining in, and I'm really more interested in adults and adult morality. And I'm going to talk a bit more about like what goes wrong in our moral thinking, like really like more like logical errors we are doing when we judge morally, right? And that includes me and Max, of course, as well. We're not proof of these errors. And so basically the idea is that you first have this history of how morality unfolds over the years, and then I provide you more with an idea of things we should really be careful about here and now, right? So the idea would be that everyone who leaves this talk has a broader understanding of morality and also maybe watches themselves thinking more often and maybe detects some inconsistencies there, which we all have for sure. I think with I'm happy to say, Max, it's your turn, and I'm really looking forward to your fascinating research and passions.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. I hope that this will work now. So, can you see a screen? Okay, great. So, I will talk about moral development, like Benjamin said. I just want to give you a very brief introduction. So I really hope that at the end, you will see, okay, this whole thing is quite complicated. And I will try to provide you a cohesive story that you can say, okay, I understand basically what it's all about. But please do not believe when you will leave that you have a complete understanding. And for sure, you will have some questions and you will say, oh, well, he cannot say this and that. And it is true. If you ask another person from psychology, he or she will give you another answer, because morality is always debated. And even when you're just talking about the theories, it is also debated because everyone is in conflict with themselves a little bit, because we all have the way how we want morality to be. So just to say this in the beginning, and it will be a viewpoint of evolutionary and developmental psychology. So never forget that. So maybe I will not talk too much about the sociological perspective for that stuff. Okay, for beginning, these are my 4 basic questions. So what is development? Just a very short introduction so that we all going to talk about the same stuff. Then the foundation of morality, which is more about evolutionary perspective. And then how these topics are combined in a human child. So also developmental perspective, but also what comes out of the evolution. And then my own idea, which I call Sylvan Minds. And I'm not sure, Benjamin, if this will greet me with the title of a professor, but nevertheless, I think it is an interesting question. So yeah, what is development? There are 2 different types of developments, and this ontogenetic development is basically the thing that all the people always think about. Well, it is like from birth of a child until adulthood, until death. So this is like this ontogenetic development of one single individual. And this is especially interesting when we look at the brain, because different regions in the brain, they have different developmental pathways. So this is one side of development, and this is an important side, especially for morality. But there is again the phylogenetic development. It is not the development of one individual, but of species. So how did the human species develop? Because very often the people say, oh, we have only one data point, we have only one human, so we cannot compare. And this is not totally true. We can compare different species to each other, especially different primate species. We can them compare quite good. And then you maybe would say, well, that seems right for cognitive development, but at least morality, this is uniquely human. Why should we look at different primates? And I try to show you that we can look at primates. We can look at some primates, what certain specialities they have, which are quite similar to our morality, or at least they are they show some specific abilities which we also have and which are very important for our moral development. And I think this perspective is extremely important because it shows us that morality is not just based on cognitive abilities like intelligence, but on other other abilities which are far less cognitively demanding. So yeah, we will talk about these three foundations of morality. So the first foundation is the ability for cooperation and altruism. So this is like the basic ability that we are able to cooperate and to show altruism towards other individuals. And maybe you would think, well, cooperation, there are a lot of animals who cooperate, and this is true on one side, especially primates, they are extremely cooperative. But when we look at humans, then we see like humans are on the extreme level of cooperation. And I think it's kind of a urban legend that a lot of people say, well, humans are not cooperative at all, they are evil, they just want to kill each other. But in the end, you have to see most of the time, 99% of your life, you're extremely cooperative. And this is very, very rare among all animals on this planet. Because we are also cooperating, even though we know that sometimes we could benefit from someone else, but we do not do it, but we help. So it is not like only innate that we cooperate, it is also our decision. And this is especially very rare. For example, we also show proactive prosociality, which means we are helping others without a demand. So we are just helping because we feel that we should help. And for example, we are world champions in food sharing, especially when we look at hunter-gatherer communities. We are world champions in information donation. No other animal is giving that many information so the individuals do give information to each other. And this has two reasons why we do this. First, we have big brains like apes, for example, chimpanzees or bonobos. Our brain is much larger in the end, but they have quite big brains too, and they are the closest relatives. So we have this big brain. But on top of that big brain, which provides us with intelligence and all that stuff, we also have cooperative breeding, which means we have a mom and dad, which brings us up. And this maybe does not seem very important, but it is, because it is shown that there are only very few other primate species which are cooperative breeders. So it is quite exceptional. And it is even more exceptional when you have such a large brain. But the point is, these other animals, some, for example, common marmosets, they're also the ones you see on the picture, they're extremely cooperative too, even though their brain is very small and they are not intelligent at all from our perspective, but they are also prosocial and they are extremely cooperative. And they are some of the very few primates that do teach intentional teaching, which is something that everybody thought was uniquely human, this intentional teaching, but they do it because they are extremely social tolerant. So it shows that this social tolerance is the key, or one of the keys, for cooperation and altruism, and is not the big brain, or not only the big brain. So this is one foundation of morality that we see in evolution, or from this evolutionary developmental perspective. Then we have the ability to accumulate culture, which is also extremely important, because morality in the end is a set of rules, and we have to accumulate these rules, and we have to build a culture around it, because we have to sustain these rules. If it's only between me and Benjamin that we have these fancy rules, this will not bring any morality for the whole human species, because I don't think that Benjamin and me are that influential. But in the end, we are all able to accumulate these cultures. And there are also reasons for that. First, humans are extreme conformists. So we are over imitating. When children are learning something, they are imitating everything, even though the things that are not important at all, and they also know that they are not important. Because when we do social learning and imitate, it is not only to learn, it is also to show the others, oh, I want to be similar to you. So there is also a social component to that. And this is very important, because it has been shown that with this over imitation, then you can accumulate culture, because you are very precisely repeating actions, and then you can build upon them. Then we have a very unique way of communication, speech. It's the probably the thing that separates us the most from all the other animals, which is important because, for example, in many cultures, hunter-gatherer cultures, the way to bring morality to other people is with stories. So storytelling is extremely important. Again, something that only us humans have. Then humans, where we canalize our general cognitive abilities with social learning. So as probably most of you know, we do not have not just modular, not just a modular brain, but we have a very high level general cognitive ability. And this has to be canalized, because otherwise we could not use it to solve a certain problem. And we channelize this general cognitive abilities with social learning. So when a child is small and has no idea how the world works, it looks at the mother and it sees, oh, okay, it's done like this or that. I have to use a pen like this, because it's not inborn how to use a pen. And this is why this is extremely important. And there is an example for that. We have this reputation management. So because we are that conformists, for us, we do not like when other people do not conform. So when other people do not imitate correctly, then we get angry. And this is something that only humans do. There are other primates who do also kind of over imitate, but they never get angry if others do not. So, like I said, we do not only imitate for practical, but also for social reason, and we do intentionally teach others, even though there are primates who also, or very, very rarely do it, but not in that extent that we humans do it. And then there is the third foundation, and this is the possibility to learn. So, I mean, obviously all the other primates can learn too, but no primate has that long span of time to learn. We have a very long childhood. Also, we need it because our big brains, they need a lot of time after we get out of the womb that this big brain can develop until it's finished. And then we also have communal childcare. So it is not just that our mother is looking after us, and especially not in these hunter-gatherer cultures. And the reason why I'm always mentioning these hunter-gatherer cultures is because we assume that the last big evolutionary step was in this time of hunter-gatherer culture, because hunter-gatherer lifestyle was the lifestyle that humans, like most of their existence, had. I mean, what we have today is quite new, and there is very rarely evolutionary adaptations. And we also have far more resources than other species. This is also extremely important because we need these resources our brain is very energy consuming, so we need that resources. So all that creates the possibility to learn that much in this very long childhood. And in this very long childhood, we have an extensive period of play. Playing is basically that what children always do. There is a very nice quote of Jean Piaget who said, "Playing is the work of children." And it's basically what we do the whole time. And we need play for a healthy development. This is also shown in the fact that when we are not able to play, then if we are deprived from playing, then as soon as we can come back to play, we will start to play more. So we need this playing. It's extremely important. And we integrate every new ability into play. So when we learn something, then the children integrate it extremely fast in their playing. So they train it. And as soon as they are masters, when they have mastered it, it disappears abruptly out of their playing repertoire, and they put in new stuff to learn. Yeah, so one question is, maybe our play period is for to organize our brain. This is also the thing that I believe and that I would agree on. So now, with our other influence, subconscious influence on the moral development, of course, upbringing. Upbringing is extremely important. That the way the style of upbringing your parents had do influence you your whole life. It shows you, it gives you a model how to see the world. It gives you a model how to see other people. So this definitely is important for moral development. Then about from the age at the latest from 7, the peer group becomes extremely important. So what friends do we have? How do they act? What are the rules in their lives? And this is very influential for us too, because again, we have to learn these rules. We are not born like with a set of morals and let's go, or maybe we are, we will see that later, but definitely not in its details. And so the peer group is extremely important, that influences us. And then again, of course, experience. If we live in an environment that shows us life is very dangerous and you will be killed if you do not kill others, then you will create a totally different view on the world, and you will create a totally different moral set, because your experience has been different. So these are just some spotlights from evolutionary perspective, but also from ontogenetical perspective now, how we are influenced. And now I want to go into some theories, or into the question of nurture or nature. I mean, this is basically the big question in psychology the whole time. Are some things that we do, is there like a biological component to it, or is it all learned and socially created? This is the big question. And very often we find that it's both, and we also find that in this example. But just give me the chance to give you a little historical view. Historically, a lot of theorists and scientists have used moral reasoning to determine the level of the moral development. So for example, when a child, if you want to know how high its moral development is, you will give it a moral dilemma and ask, oh, what would you do in this situation? And on which answer they will give, you know, okay, the moral development is like, it's very fast in their development or not. So this is obviously correlated with your brain development, because reasoning is correlated with your brain development. It's especially correlated with the development of your frontal lobe, which is the latest thing in your brain that develops to the full. And also a little bit of experience, of course. So the point is, if you have this if you believe there is this white plane and there is only these things that the children learn, and then and with your brain development the moral level will be enhanced, then you have a problem, because then a newborn would be completely amoral, and it needs this brain development to become a little bit moral, and also this experience. But then there has been a break in this whole theories, because then there have been people who have shown, oh no, also very young children, so I mean like 1 year old, they have some ideas. They prefer, for example, people more who help than people who do not help. So there is this very early stage of deciding which people the children like more, and one of the criterion is obviously and how these people act. And this is absolutely not what we have would have expected when it's only about brain development. So there has been other studies, and today we know that there is a basic moral process which is based on emotions. So we are basically born with a emotional set that shows us right and wrong. This is very simplified, of course, but just that you understand what I mean. And these processes are inborn and based on biological constitution of a child, so basically genetics. But also, if you have enough resources, if your mother has drunken any alcohol or something like this, all this stuff has influences on the child when it will come to this world. So there is this one very famous model from Lawrence Kohlberg from 1976. It's a stage theory of moral development. This is a very classical idea that morality is linked to brain development and it is linked to experience. So these are these very early models, and this model is especially influential. And what you can see is in infancy, but also in preschool, it is very self-focused. So the children are basically deciding, oh, I think something is good or bad on the parameter if they get punished or not. This is just how they see it. And then maybe with time it shifts more in direction of reward, because rewards are more salient than punishments. But in the end, it's very self-focused. And then with the school age, there is some kind of conformity. So it is like, okay, there are rules, and these rules, if I act according to them, then the people will like me. And this is what the child wants. So it is still quite self-interested, but the perspective is wider. Now we have the perspective of the group, of the community. And also this becomes a bit more complex, because they start to realize, oh, okay, there are some differences between social conventions and between like moral rules. They are more absolute, but still it is all about following the rules to be liked. And then in the teens age, there is this social contract. So they realize, oh, there is a mutual benefit of reciprocity. So it is not just about like that I am loved. So, but it's also like this whole rules should work for the whole system. It should create a more stable system. So now the perspective is far wider than the child itself. And then in adulthood, there are these universal principles, and this is more like on an abstract level. So I do not really think about my community, that my community works, but it's more like whole humanity should act according to some rules, because if they do, then we will have a better life. So this is like these universal principles. And even Kohlberg thought that not every human being will achieve these universal principles. So I think everyone can decide for themselves if they believe that everyone has these universal principles in their lives. So as we have seen, with each stage, a larger group is included into the moral reasoning process. The central parameter is justice. The question is just how large is the group that I should give justice? And reciprocity becomes more inclusive with every stage. How have they determined these stages? They have done, over 25 years, they have done moral dilemmas with children, and they have looked how old is the child and what is the answer for this moral dilemma. And this is how they constructed the whole theory. And across development, children construct a deeper moral understanding, which is the basis to evaluate if some opinions are better than others. So this is also an approach which is kind of a counter approach to this whole moral relativistic view, because this was another theory development at the same time. But what this theory cannot explain is the difference or the gap between moral reasoning and moral action. And also cultural influences are not represented, because we know that a lot of people are quite morally reasoning, but in the end they're not acting upon this reasoning process. And this stage model has no explanation for that. So then now we have in 2012 this moral foundation theory. Well, it has already been proposed quite early, a bit earlier, but this was the book that Haidt published. where he has shown, or at least he says he has shown, that there are some moral foundations which have been biological adaptation in evolution, and they are extremely important for humans. So they are inborn, and on top of that, all culture is built. And this is very important in his opinion, because he has linked that to politics. He has shown that conservatives and liberals do not care or do not have the same moral foundations, or they do at least not care about the same moral foundations. So for liberals, they only care about care, fairness, and liberty. Conservatives do also care about that, but also about loyalty, sanctity, and authority. And he has shown in a lot of studies that this is quite good linked to politics and to this view of, like, some people are conservative, some people are liberals. And basically what he says is, we are already born with that. And it seems, because both these views exist, that they are both equally adaptive, or maybe even both views need each other so that a community can be successful. So yeah, this is just his idea, but it should just show you this is another theory, quite far newer theory, that shows that there is not just this social learning, not just this brain development, there is also something that comes out of evolution, and that is very concrete, in his opinion at least. So yeah, I've already told these things. Yeah. And he says very often our reasoning is a post hoc explanation to protect our identity, so that when people ask you, oh, why did you do that? Then we think about the reason why we did do that. So he's quite direct when he is criticizing moral reasoning, but there are also a lot of people criticizing him because he is quite strict with his own rules and everything, and he's always discrediting the other stuff. So he's not everyone likes what he says. But there, like I said, there's also a lot of critics. And now we also have this dual process theory from Kahneman, which basically integrates, like, these ideas of there is something coming out of evolution, something very heuristic, of very early experience in life, that are subconscious, and there is this type 2 processing, which would basically build this moral reasoning, and these systems are interconnected and influence each other. But I will not go into detail for that, because on one side, maybe Benjamin will also talk about it a little bit, and also because it is more influential for grown-ups, because for children, this basic moral emotion of just wanting to help, like the thing that we also have seen in these very small monkeys, are a lot more important than for grown-ups. But nevertheless, the children have a cognitive development, of course, and they start to change their reasoning process too. So now I will talk about my own ideas. Like I said, I call it the Sylvan Mind hypotheses, and it is all about playing. To be more precise, it's about contexts. So, like Benjamin said, I'm very interested in the psychological development of children. I also work with children, so I have a lot of practical experience, but I have also a lot of theoretical experience. And what I've found is that children do play in different contexts. And I have asked myself, okay, now what will this create in the end? I mean, when we see, okay, playing is important and it has important functions, maybe it also is important where the children play, because this influences how they play. And so we have, on one side, we have this artificial playground, and on the other side, we have this forest. And this is very simplified now, because I do not have enough time to explain everything. But basically what I say is there is consuming and there is creating. And I do not want to say that, oh, every child who is playing on this artificial playground is only consuming, and every child which is playing in the forest is only creating. I just speak about tendencies, because when the children are on this artificial playground, they are playing in a different way. They are closer to all the electronics. They are closer to their parents. I will show you later why this is important. And in the forest, they're more likely to be alone, or well, together, but not with their parents. They're more likely to build stuff by themselves, and they're more likely to create their own rules. So what we see is contextual differences create play differences, or differences in play. For example, nature has less social structures and less predefined meanings. Basically, if you have like this climbing tower, it's clear it is for climbing, but the tree can be much more than just for climbing, so there is less predefined meaning. And also less social rules, because on a playground there is always this plate which shows you have to do that, that, and that. In the forest, there are no such rules. Nature grows with the child. So basically, when the child is growing up, brain is developing, then maybe something that has been just for playing later becomes something to understand. For example, the tree in the beginning is just for climbing, but with time you start to understand the ecology, and it is also a thing for different experiences. So for every age of the child, the forest, or especially nature in all its forms, gives a perfect response for interaction. And then in nature, children act less aggressively. In nature, parents wait longer until they correct their children. This is very important because children learn from failing. In nature, children play for longer and play more together, also female and males. Nature is a place for adventure, and the children explore more, which is very important for the cognitive development. In nature, children can learn responsibility for living things because they understand, oh, when I crush the bug, it is dead. And so it has something terminal, it has something that you cannot learn inside. And in nature, children show more pretend, more constructive and social play. And this is especially important. Because there is another, now you could ask, why is he talking about nature, about playgrounds? What is this, all this stuff? The thing is, there is a very influential theory of moral development from Jean Piaget. He showed that playing is basically the reason why children are moral. There are people who say, oh, this theory is not correct, but there is a lot of evidence that at least playing is very important. Because from the age of 3 to 4, children are pre-moral. So they really do not understand set of rules. They understand sometimes they're punished, okay, they avoid it, but it's more like conditioned learning, but they do not understand it. From the age of 4 to 6, children follow a moral realism. So they believe, okay, when there is a rule that is set by the authority, then it's clear you cannot change it. All the rules are the same. And then later, the children gradually challenge their idea of absolute rules. So they think, oh, if my mother says I cannot do it, this is not absolute. But for example, to not kill somebody, this is absolute. So they start to realize, oh, there are differences. And they also start to realize, oh, I can change rules. And they especially learn it in playing, because in the beginning, they're just playing according to the rules. With time, they try to cheat. And cheating is great because this shows that the children understand rules can be changed. They're only conventions. And from the age of 11, children have a moral reciprocity. So they understand, okay, if me and Benjamin, we are playing in the forest and we say, okay, the new rule is nobody touches the tree. And if I do, I understand I have broken our rules. And this is very important development because it shows them if you can change rules, you also have responsibility that the rules are not broken. So this is very important. And so we can say play is the engine behind this moral development. Children play all the time. They integrate new things in their play behavior according to the understanding of rules. We have an interaction of children from different ages in the forest or in the nature. They're more likely to play together, the older and the younger children, because they're not separated playgrounds. And rules from play are the rules which form the rules for life. This is very important. A lot of children, there are some great studies around which show that that if you're playing on a playground and and is a very hostile place, then you will show more hostility in your later life. And this is also depending on the culture of the playground or the culture of the people living nearby. So all this stuff matters. So these are my thoughts. Context guides our behavior. If there are less rules, we tend to rely on our inner thoughts, or the children do, or inner thoughts, inner feelings, gut feelings, however you want to call it. If we act according to these thoughts and we aren't successful, we will adapt. If we act according to our own inner rules, then we adapt them because they are not good. If we act according to social and contextual rules and aren't successful, we will blame the rules, which we very often can't change. We cannot change the rules of the playground. And culture is very important to understand the rules of society. So I don't want to say that we don't need school or that we don't need cultural education. I just say nature is a very important additional thing to shape this inner moral compass of the child. So nature doesn't have an exclusive role, but could be a great chance to make children more self-confident with creating and crafting the world around them. And this in the end leads to responsibility. And I think I don't have to explain that responsibility, especially responsibility with rules, is maybe one of the most important things when we talk about morality. And like I said, you can learn this in school, but maybe nature is just a better context. And today, nowadays, children are deprived from nature because very often the parents are scared to send them into the forest because they believe the forest is dangerous. And I always ask the same question. Is it more dangerous to send your child into the forest, or is it more dangerous to not send your child into the forest? When you look on the short-term perspective, maybe it is more dangerous to send him there. But I think on the long-term perspective, it is more dangerous to keep your child at home. So I will skip that because I've already spoken over the time. So if anybody of you have any interest in pretend play, which is basically what I'm focused on when I studied children, then just ask me afterwards. I'm very happy to talk about. So this is the difference, what I would say, with consuming and creating. And there are also several studies that show, okay, our brain is shaped by that. So brains can be trained to be consuming brains, or brains can also be shaped to be creating, to be creative. And I think a lot of this shaping is dependent on this playing as a child. So my summary would be: moral development isn't straightforward. It is a mixture of biological predispositions, social influences, and also contextual factors. There are evolutionary influences that shape our morality which go far beyond mere cognitive development, like this social tolerance which we have in common with very small monkeys. Children are never independent from other people. They learn almost everything socially, but even though they have reason abilities, their intuitions are an important driver behind moral actions and thought. So yes, they can reason, and yes, they can reason quite early, and this is very impressive, but in the end, these intuitions are there and they are important. And I just say we should bring back our children to this unstructured nature, because this could at least be a possibility for learning and having fun, because this for sure, the children have more fun in nature. This has been shown to, I don't know, I think this is maybe absolute fact that they have more fun in nature in general. But maybe it could also be a great moral playground in our quite complex world. And I would say our world gets even more complex every day. And probably sometimes we have to step back, and sometimes we just have to try and send the children to a place where they can learn to be responsible and not only follow the rules, because I think in the end this is not the best development for them. So yes, I have finished now, and I hope it was interesting for you, and I'm looking forward to Benjamin's part.